Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Cake Podcast. We talk about anything and everything that has to do with that spiritual side of our existence. You're familiar with the physical and the mental and the emotional, but we have been discussing the spiritual, whatever that is. My name is Clint Houghton. With me is Wendy Dahl. Wendy?
Hi, Clint.
Hello, Wendy. If you're joining us for the first time, you should know that neither Wendy nor I run any kind of a religious organization. Plus, our formal education has not been along those lines. We were both raised relatively conservative Christian. Wendy is Mormon. I was raised Lutheran, but have since explored a lot of different philosophies and theologies. Plus, we are both in the event industry with an international clientele. And that has exposed us to a lot of different customs and rituals and traditions. And we bring all of that into this conversation. And if you want to join the conversation, then at the end of this episode, we will tell you how to do that. Wendy, I ran into a guy who at one point was a chaplain for a military base. Then I started thinking about, well, what is a chaplain? How does one become a chaplain? Because it sounds kind of cool to a point. Do you have an idea? Can you give me a definition of what a chaplain is?
I mean, I go back to Hollywood when I think of a chaplain, and if they're on a military base, then they're praying over people that are sick and injured and getting them married and, doing kind of the efficient duties just in that case on base. And I think chaplain to me means like non-denominational.
I would think, but I was really curious about that because is it non-denial or does it have to be? How does one become a chaplain and what are the parameters for that? Because a part of it sounds like it'd be a cool job, but then a part of it sounds like it may not be a cool job. I don't know. I went to the third member of our podcast, which is Chat TBT. What is a chaplain? A chaplain is a clergy member or a spiritual caregiver. See, there's some wiggle room right there
Hmm.
because clergy usually requires some sort of certification or something, or a spiritual caregiver who provides religious or spiritual support in a non-church setting. Well, with that description, a chaplain can be anywhere. You know what I mean? We always see them in certain settings. A chaplain could be any non-church setting. I mean, a chaplain could be at a park or office building, or I mean, that's the way I interpret that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, what does a chaplain do? Prayers, counseling, and spiritual guidance was exactly what you just said. Supports people during crisis, illness, grief, or major, which is exactly what you just said. Serves people of all faiths, which is again what you said, and often those with no religious affiliation. That's always kind of an interesting conversation. When I'm talking to somebody, like for instance, I had a friend of mine that I first met when we were in third grade. And so we stayed in contact and had a friendship all the way up until I don't know, less than 10 years ago, but he got cancer and he passed away. But before he passed away, a mutual friend of ours called me and said, Ken's dying. He wants to see you. So I reached out to him. I kind of had this reputation, I guess, amongst the people that knew me because I went to church all the time and I didn't wear my religion on my sleeve, but still they knew that that was part of my life. I went to him. He had the bed in his house and he was hooked up to IV. And so he rolled everything around wherever he was. And he did look like he had cancer. The conversation, I kind of wanted to know how he was feeling or what could I do. And I didn't want to come right out and say that. I was in this weird place. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You mean a weird place of why he wanted you there?
No, a weird place of how do I handle this? Because I know he's not religious.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And it felt as though he was looking for some sort of
Yeah.
comfort or some
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
real conversation.
I actually have some friends that are non-religious at all, and some that even don't believe in a higher power or even universe. And I don't quite relate with that, but like I love them just the same. But it was funny, I was actually with one of them yesterday, and I had said something about how like God wouldn't let me go through a challenge like that because he knew I would fail. And she just looked at me like, God, no, you could do anything. And I was just like, no, like, I know that I've been given challenges that I've never seen coming my way, but there are certain challenges where I think I know for sure I would fail. And I'm grateful that that challenge wasn't mine.
There is a
Mhm.
philosophy, I think, of God will only give you the challenges that he knows you can handle, or something
Mhm.
along those lines. I forget what the exact verbiage is. That's kind of like what you're saying. It's the other side of that, which is no, I didn't get that because I don't think God thinks I could handle that.
Right.
Which,
But she
but
was like, why is God involved in this equation? And, you know, so that was where I was going, where I can identify with what you were thinking with your friend, because I was like, well, now what? Like, she doesn't believe in God. Like, how do we go on from here?
I mentioned in a previous podcast that a previous episode that I have a friend who's an atheist. And the way
Mhm.
he described it to me is that no, I'm an atheist, so is my wife, and we're very okay with that.
Yeah.
We're very okay with the fact that we live this life and then we're done. I think our body, because we have survival instincts, anything that threatens our life, this life, can be really scary because I think that's just built into us, along with
Hmm.
a bunch of other things that we've talked about in previous episodes. The fact that he has made peace with that is a big deal, in my opinion. Some people will say, well, we don't know what's beyond this life. So, and maybe there's nothing beyond this life. So you better make the most of this life. I get that. I appreciate that. Okay. I do think that we have to enjoy this life no matter what. But when you're talking to somebody who doesn't have a grip on the afterlife, I mean, I admit that I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I love the quote that I got from my yogi friend where he said, I said, what do you think is going to happen when we die? He says, I don't know, but I know God's going to take care of me. And I thought, oh, I'll wrap my mind around that and take that all the way to the end. It offers so much comfort that we don't know what it is. But I like the what you say, which is, you get to wherever it is or whatever it is. And there's the, oh, so that's how it works without any
It's
real
even
like,
better than we thought.
without any real like disappointment that it isn't,
Mhm.
I was expecting chocolate ice cream and you gave me strawberry. Ice cream is pretty good no matter what. That's a great analogy. Wow. I'm going to start using that. Okay. Yeah. The afterlife is like ice cream. It may not be chocolate, but it's going to be something good. Having the conversation with my friend at that moment, I was sort of a chaplain because I think that the way I recall it, the concept of what happens next, he knew that I believed that there was something good. I think I said to him, you're going to be taken care of. You're going to be okay. I don't know exactly what's next, but I know that you're going to be fine. I'm just hoping that that gave him some comfort or solace or whatever. I could be blowing that out of proportion. It could be he just wanted some companionship. You know how people sometimes they want closure over different relationships? Does that make
Yeah, but
sense?
I almost wonder, or I suspect, he was contemplating the potential of a God. Because I feel like sometimes I have people in my life that need to learn something from me based on my beliefs. They ask me what I think based on my belief system, and I mean, they can take it or leave it for whatever it's worth, but I feel like there's the people that it's like the people that don't know how to pray, or the people that like have never gone to church and have never contemplated going to church, but then they know I go to church and they want to know like more about it. And so I wonder if your friend, like, I mean, obviously I haven't been to the end of my life to contemplate all the things, but I've heard other people like my grandparents have passed, and I understand that it's quite a reflective time. And I think that maybe in a moment he might have thought, maybe I need a little bit of you because I don't have that. And thanks for coming and sharing you with me.
I like the way you said that. I just got a weird feeling. I need a little bit of you. That's a
Hmm.
huge compliment if he's thinking of it from a positive standpoint. That's interesting. And this is going to sound a little interesting. We're both in the event industry, and the event industry has networking events. And the idea is that you do exactly what it says. You meet people, and then hopefully you form relationships, and maybe that will lead to business. Maybe it won't, but maybe it's just a friendship. But whatever it is, when I get the notice or an invitation to go to a networking event, I'm waiting for an impulse. And if I get an impulse like, oh, I need to go to that, I know that the networking side of it is a side benefit or a side effect. But I'm going to it because somebody needs to talk to me. That's happened over and over and over again. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an intense religious conversation at all. But sometimes people just need comfort. There's a guy that I talked him through. He was going through a divorce, and it was during the pandemic, and he was all of that and so on. And so there's been many conversations that I've had with people. And I think to myself, while I'm in the middle of it, oh, this is why I was supposed to come to this because somebody needed to talk to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I get that when I speak in front of large audiences, and then someone comes up afterwards and they're like, it was like you were speaking to my soul.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you always hope that people connect with you like that, especially from a stage, and it's not an intimate conversation, but we're human and we need each other. And there's gaps that everybody has. Like I have gaps, you have gaps, we all have gaps that like other people can fill. Sometimes you don't even know you have the gap until you're talking to them and you're like, gosh, that's why we meant to,
Yes.
to talk tonight. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
No,
Uh-huh.
I think we've even had a conversation like that where I was like, I think I needed to hear that.
Yeah. And likewise. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a fascinating thing when it hits you like an aha. When
Mhm.
I do memorial services or funerals, I always talk about how the person who's passed on, they may not even realize that they impacted you, the people that are in the room, the people that are attending the service. They may have no idea that they said something and it could have been just something off the top of their head or an aside or whatever. But for some reason, you remember that and you'll never forget it because it was something that really moved you or influenced you or changed the way you look at something. And the person will have no idea, but this is how you honor that person by acknowledging that that thing happened. And that was a positive contribution to you and the way you look at the world.
Hmm.
And that always resonates. I mean, it's interesting when you do a service. I'm not really sure what I'm getting from people because they're just listening to me. If I was a comedian, then I would look for people to laugh or, that kind of stuff. But in that situation, when I'm doing a service, I guess the only thing that really gives me positive feedback or affirmation is when people nod their head. And that's all I need. That's like, oh, okay, you're with me. All right, that's good. Getting back to when people come up to you and say, it's like you were looking into my soul, or however you phrased it, what topics were you speaking on that got that kind of response?
What's interesting is it's a sales conversation talk, essentially how to sell to women, but it was called Conversations That Close. And I talk a lot about fear in Conversations That Close because it's interesting. I actually had two instances just in one day this week where I was like, these people are salespeople and they're afraid to sell. And you can tell that they're afraid to sell because they make it hard to buy. Just give them the bottom line. Tell them how easy it is to buy. Tell them what it costs and what they get. But no, it's like this interaction like 4 or 5 times. And so I think when I talk about fear, everybody has fear. When I get into the emotion of fear and what it does to you and how it holds you back, and if you just made like warm fuzzies around fear, where fear's going to be there, but like what if fear is meant to propel you forward? What if, and I start kind of contemplating fear in a positive way. And I think that there are some people that are just so, and it astounds me too, because some people have businesses, like they're entrepreneurs and they're so like riddled with fear. And I'm just like, how did you launch? I think sometimes, they wake up and they're like, I'm tired of being in the corporate world. I'm going to start my own business, and then they do. And then they realize that there's these hurdles of fear. Like every time you move forward, there's something new to be afraid of. Yeah, it was interesting where I actually went to a conference yesterday and there was a gentleman, he was a house DJ in the 90s and he turned into a real estate agent and he was talking about fear and he goes, I'll tell you that, I love people and I care about people, but he goes, I don't care about what people think. And he
Mm.
goes, and that's the only thing that's given me success in transitioning from the music industry because he had like all these number ones and I'm sitting there going, I used to listen to him in the 90s. Like, no way. Here he is, a real estate agent. But he said, the reason why he needed to do it was because he was addicted to cocaine and he was like, I
Oh,
couldn't be
wow.
in that. Yeah, I couldn't be in that life anymore. And so,
Yeah.
but he defined how he dealt with his fear of transitioning from one industry to the next. And he said, I just had to stop caring what people think. And I thought about that yesterday and I said, of all the times I've ever talked about fear, that's a very common thread where you get into an industry, you launch your business, or you're doing something cool in the world, and then there's that fear. I even have the fear. I don't know about you, but I haven't posted on social media like I used to for probably 5 years just because I'm sick of the banter on social media. Like what happened to friendliness and kindness and love one another and be a good neighbor, and now it's like it's just trolls right and left. And I'm just like, ugh. I need to get into that space of not caring what other people think about what I say because it is positive and the world needs it. I feel like I had the same kind of shift that other people who listen to me speak about fear had, where I was like, why am I afraid about these negative comments? Like, I feel sorry for them. Like, I wish I could hug them and say, are you okay now?
Oh,
You feel better? Did saying that make you feel better? Does it not feel better? Maybe just don't do it. So it was always a fear thing. Whenever I talk to people about fear, it's like I penetrate into their souls and then they remember me.
oh, yeah, because fear is just such a part of every human's life. Most of the things that people are afraid of is other people, of being
Exactly.
judged. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's much, we're not afraid that selling to somebody is going to threaten our lives. We're afraid of, well, like for instance, one of my fears, I think maybe I finally have come to terms, I don't know, the idea that somebody else will not want what I'm offering. That in itself is no big deal. But if they get annoyed or they feel uncomfortable saying no, I think there's a lot of that
Oh,
people
sure.
don't know how to deal with that. They feel really uncomfortable saying no. And sometimes that translates into anger, stop bothering me, that kind of a thing. There was a TED talk. There was a TED talk about a guy that was getting spam emails and he decided to play with it. And the whole thing was hilarious. Well, sometimes he would get on a phone call with somebody he knew was at a call center, and he would just start questioning things. Well, have you ever thought of this? And just taking the conversation to see where it would go. That's one way to deal with a fear type of a deal. The other thing in regards to social media, what I've read is that a lot of, I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of it is just bots.
Yeah.
I think the writer and speaker Seth Godin turns
Mhm.
off the comments on all of his blog posts when he's been blogging for a long, 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 long time, tens of thousands every day he writes. Turning off the comments, when I heard that, that kind of freed my mind that, oh, okay, I'm just offering something positive. So now let's bring it back full circle to my friend who wanted to have a conversation and wanted to interact with me. There was a point where I realized I don't have to try. I don't have to overthink this. All I have to do is just have a conversation. And whatever comes up naturally is going to come up naturally. And hopefully he will find some comfort in that. And that was a huge thing for me in regards to not putting the extra pressure on myself as if I were a chaplain, like I have to perform or I have to achieve some specific goal. Like, oh my gosh, I've reached out to him and now he sees the light and he hears the songs of angels. And I wonder if one would take on the role of a chaplain and whatever, however you get to that, if there's a way to do it without putting extra pressure on yourself. I think that would be a really key thing to enjoying the job of chaplain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder sometimes if people are already chaplains and they don't realize it.
That's true.
I mean, it's interesting. I actually think about hospitals in particular because I've been with my family members, I've been in the hospital quite a bit lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going into the chapel and there was a chaplain in there. I was starting to ask questions too, like, how is this a job? Do you volunteer? And it was just sort of like a volunteer. They were unpaid and it was a volunteer thing where they just came. I should have asked more questions, but it didn't strike me as somebody that was in an official role. It was just somebody who wanted to be there to help people. I love when people discover like their testimony where it's like there's a friend of mine that had a health scare and now she's like visibly posting about the Bible on her social media and I was like, wow, before that you would never have posted that. And I love that she wants to influence others and like sometimes I'll read the stuff that she posts. I was like, you know what? I needed that today. And so in a way, she's kind of like a chaplain or influencer. I kind of look like chaplains, like they show up in different forms.
That's really well said. That's interesting. My first reaction when you talked about your friend who now all of a sudden started posting Bible verses, my first impulse, and I'm not saying this is a nice impulse, but my first impulse was she's trying to get points because if she's
Mhm.
worried about the afterlife, she's trying to kind of get points so that the afterlife is going to be good for her. And so going back to the Bible and spreading the word, so to speak, it could be not that at all. It could be that she finally is connected and she does think that other people can benefit from it. And I hope it's the latter. And having a confession to my own impulse on that is well, c'est la vie.
Right.
Oh, the other thing, getting back to when you were talking to the chaplain, what occurred to me, there was a phrase that seems to be kind of popular right now where you hold space. I think it means that you just let a person be whoever they are and wherever they are and whatever they're experiencing, and you give them non-judgmental space, but yet companionship and respect. That's incredibly valuable. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, there you go. Wendy, tell everybody how they get in touch with us.
You can find us at spiritualcake.com where you can go back and listen to or read any of our previous episodes. You can click one of the two social media icons and join us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can send an email requesting a topic or even to join the conversation.
Absolutely. And when you do join the conversation, please know we welcome you with open arms. That's it for this episode of the Spiritual Cake Podcast. This is Clint, and on behalf of Wendy, we will see you next time.